Hello.
Hello, that was a bit of a technical failure. I don't know what happened there. We normally start with an intro bit of video, and I clicked the
Yeah.
link, and nothing happened. It's just gone completely
Gotta love
blank
technology.
on my screen. So hello, good afternoon, good morning. It's good morning for you.
11 a.m. here. What time? You did the time change, so we're all confused this week. Is it 6
Yeah.
there?
So we're 6 o'clock here, and I
Okay.
think did you say you're 11?
11.
Yeah. So
So our time changes this weekend.
yeah. So okay. Well, thank you again for coming on. Thank you very
Yeah, how
much.
are you, Bruce?
I'm good. I'm good. Just we talked about it the other night, but I've just unicycled the NC500, so that was fun.
No big deal.
And we've just had good news today that the BBC are coming to do an interview next week, and they also want me to go into the BBC radio, one of the main radio stations here in Scotland.
Wow.
So it's good. It's just more for promotion for getting the message out there for the Sinclair Method.
Yeah, that's
Um,
so
so
cool. I can't
so
wait.
so we'll see. We'll see what it's like.
Yeah.
So, and yourself, you were away in France and abroad.
Yeah, I was in France. My husband's from there, so visiting his family and stuff. And yeah, it was a wonderful trip. It was great. And yeah, things are good. Feel the season's changing, which is nice. And, everything's good. Just still kind of trying to get the Sinclair method to be, something that the whole world knows about, like you. But I'm not going to do the unicycling. I've got to think some other things.
And I've just seen I've clicked the wrong button, so I'm going to have a 10-second click the button correct. Are you ready?
Yeah. Awesome.
There we go. I just thought I'd do that.
That's what you guys were supposed to see earlier, right?
Yeah, that's what should have happened at the start. So if you click the right button, it helps. Anyway, I know that tonight we are both a bit tight. You need to go off to another meeting, and it's night time for me. I'm playing in. I've got a music gig later on this evening, so I need to be away quite sharp, and so do you. So should we just jump straight in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
We haven't had any pre-meeting chat tonight, but one thing I was going to start with tonight anyway was I was sitting watching the One Little Pill trailer again, and there was one thing that I've seen loads of times that Dr. Sinclair said, and he said that following the back of his research, the way that we've been used to treating alcohol dependency, or AUD, is wrong. And I've heard that loads of times, and it was quite a bold statement to make. And the more I've started to think about it over the last couple of days, the more I've realized that it is. Now, that doesn't mean that again, just a quick disclaimer for anyone watching it, it doesn't mean that other programs don't work. They do work for some people. And for the people that it works for, we support every method possible. But what I mean by the way that we've treated alcohol dependency for the last few years is wrong is I believe it's the starting point. Where we start with the whole process is wrong. Yeah. Not wrong, but medical science, neuroscience has moved on considerably. So the starting point with what we do comes from it's a neurological condition that is treatable with medication and one-to-one support. Yeah. Whereas all the programs available today, your 12-step programs, your abstinence-based programs, are all coming from a starting point of you need to stop drinking. It's your choice to drink. It's willpower and character strength that maintains the sobriety. So let's start there.
I know. And, it's like with anything in life, there's a number of different options for people to choose from. Like some people are AA diehards. I have people in my family that are sober today from AA, and you and I, we never knock it. But when we look at the statistics or the statistics of traditional treatment, which it's a well-known statistic that 80% or more of people relapse after leaving traditional treatment within 6 months. So it's, these treatments are working for a minority of people. But what about the 80% or more that keep relapsing? And I think just like you're saying, it goes to that point of these treatments are not dealing with the root or the source of the alcohol addiction, which is occurring inside of the brain. And so people can go to as much talk therapy as they want, but it's not going to fix that urge to drink. And I know you come from that traditional rehab space, and you've told me how you saw people relapse over and over again, and what you've learned kind of coming from that space, that it's because of the craving. If someone doesn't want to drink, they're probably not going to relapse. Like, why would you do something you don't want to do? But when someone's fighting that craving day in and day out, and it's just getting more and more intense, if they have one crappy day, it can send them into it can be a trigger that can send them into a relapse really easily, because they really want to drink anyway. Because the traditional talk therapy treatments, while they're great and they can be an awesome complement to the Sinclair method, it's not dealing with what's going on in the brain. And my story, like, that was my struggle as well. I tried to quit drinking dozens of times, and I would relapse, whether it was a couple days, couple weeks, couple months. And I now know it was because I was just, my brain was telling me I need to drink. And so today I'm over 4 years alcohol free, no problem, because the Sinclair method fixed my brain. I don't have any urge to drink, so it's really easy to not drink. It doesn't even occur to me to drink.
And I had a conversation. Sorry, just if anyone's here and they've got any questions, we've got a chat section, so please feel free to ask any questions if it comes along. I had an inquiry today from a gentleman, and we were talking a bit today about, he was saying that he had been to counseling, he had been to therapy, about his drinking and about everything else. And he said at the end of it, he said it didn't really get him anywhere. And when I went in and started to explain possibly why that was the case, all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb moment for him. All of a sudden, it woke up and he thought, wow, that's incredible. And the reason for that is that until the brain becomes dependent on the endorphins that's produced as a result of drinking alcohol, it is a choice. It is a choice. We want to go to the bar, we want to go to the pub, we want to have a drink. However, when it gets to the stage where the brain then tips over and it becomes dependency, what then happens is from that day onwards, the reason people are drinking is because the brain is dependent on the endorphin reward. So it then becomes two very, very separate issues. So like you say, it complements the Sinclair method well, as long as you're dealing with the root cause, which is what I was saying at the very beginning. It goes back to the root cause of alcohol dependency is a neurological condition and not a willpower or a moral failing.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just chatting with a gal yesterday who she would be categorized severe alcohol use disorder, to the point where she was having delirium tremens. She was in and out of rehabs, having to go to hospitals for detox and all of these different things. And she was telling me that when she started drinking, she had an off switch. She was like, I didn't even know that there wasn't an off switch. Like, I could drink one or two, I'd be fine, no issue. But it really escalated for her in recent years. And it got to this point of extreme alcohol use disorder. So she started out as someone who had no issues with alcohol, but with repeated use. And for her, she was using it particularly as a coping tool. It quickly turned into this severe case of alcohol use disorder. Like you said, like, it's that choice to drink. A lot of people drink and, don't really think twice about it. But for me, what I realized, like, I was drinking thinking that I was immune to getting addicted. I just thought, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. But what's crazy is it can happen to almost anyone by enough repeated drinking. And, like we always say, it's like people don't set out to develop alcohol use disorder. It's just something that can happen. And oftentimes it sneaks up on you. Like that gal was saying yesterday, she's like, I wasn't even expecting this. And before I knew it, it was like full-blown alcohol addiction.
And I know that, again, if you don't mind me picking on you for a second.
Please.
I know that you've used TSM, you've gone through the process. Did you find it completely strange and unusual to be dealing with, let's just give me another thought for something else. Did you find it strange having to deal with your AUD the Sinclair Method way, with medication and reduction program, rather than abstinence? Did that kind of, how did you get around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. it was a relief, I think, honestly, because I tried so many times to quit and I saw that it wasn't working. And right before I got on this Sinclair method, I was really having this moment of like, I give up. Like, this is just something I'm going to have to deal with the rest of my life. Like, I guess some people are just, alcoholics, even though I don't like that term. I was just kind of like, oh, well, like, I guess that's what it is. So when I learned about a treatment that I could still drink, which was like the thing that I was really struggling with, was just not drinking. And so knowing that I could still drink and take this medicine, which would gradually de-addict my brain, I really trusted the process. And I know sometimes people come into this with fear that it won't work, or they feel bad because they're drinking and maybe they think they should be sober. For me, I think it was kind of like, well, nothing else has worked, let me try this. And I honestly just completely trusted that it was going to work. After understanding the science, I was like, of course this is going to work. And so I think going into it with that belief and being committed to it, like, compliance was never an issue for me, like taking the medication properly, because I was so ready for this to be behind me. I didn't want to, continue with this issue because it caused so much struggle. So I think going into it, believing this is going to work, going into it, knowing you're always going to be compliant, that's like a really strong foundation of starting this treatment. So it was exciting for me is what it was. I don't think it was strange. It was just like super exciting that this had even existed. It's like, I felt like I discovered a gold mine. I was like, no way, this, like, the treatment I always wanted, it actually exists and it actually works. This is so great. So yeah.
The chat I had with a gentleman today, when I do two things when I'm speaking to someone new, is I explain to them from a neurological process what causes addiction in the first place, and then I go on to explain the Sinclair method and how that overcomes the whole thing. And this guy he was completely blown away. And he was on the phone expecting me to be a counselor of some sort, where I was going to explain about therapy, and we can sit down, we can have a meeting once a week, and we can talk things through, and we can do this, that, and another. And then, and he started off quite gingerly saying, "Oh, I'm not really good at counselling and everything else." And I said, I'm not a trained counsellor. And when I went in to explain about it all, you hear people start off. He got more and more relaxed as I was speaking to him, and he was just kind of, you can hear in the voice, they're just completely blown away with. And it's like, wow, here is somebody who's talking my language for the first time, and is also at a stage where they just all of a sudden, actually, hang on a minute, this works, and it makes sense, and it makes scientific sense if anyone's got a scientific background or medical background, and it also logically, when it's broken down and explained right the way through, it makes absolute sense. I was going to ask you as well, because I saw a post that you've done the last couple of days, or today or yesterday or something, about Sober October. Oh. My pet hate. And I know from your thing it is too. Not your pet hate, but I hear a lot of guys, Sober October is good for some people if you have no level of dependency. Now, if you have any level of dependency on alcohol, my advice would be, don't touch it with a barge pole. Mm-hmm. Give your money to charity, absolutely. Just give a donation to charity, whatever it is, but don't touch it with a barge pole. And Katie will explain why.
Yeah. And honestly, like, okay, so you and I both know, and for people listening, like, when we have alcohol use disorder, it's not impacting the part of our brain that is responsible for logic and reason. So logically, if you have alcohol use disorder, even if you're the person struggling or a loved one, wants you to fix this problem, logically, it's like, yeah, take a break from drinking. It'll help reset your habits. It will help you, get your control back, or maybe, have healthier habits or whatever. So logically, it seems like a great idea. And I myself, I would do these sobriety challenges. Anytime there was one, I would attempt it. And I don't think I ever made it full. Maybe I made it through one full 30-day some challenge. I don't remember which one, but I could never make it through. And I would honestly feel so frustrated with myself, because I'd be motivated day one. Yes, it's going to be a healthy month. I'm not going to drink. I'm going to do this, that. But as a few days in or a couple of weeks in, I'm like, this is hard. And all I want to do is drink. And, the reason we know that is really thanks to David Sinclair's brilliant research on the alcohol deprivation effect, which there's a lot more research outside of just him on this phenomenon as well. But what we now know is that once someone has the alcohol use disorder, existing in their brain, it's dependent upon it, because your brain is really dependent on the reward your brain gets when you drink. So if you're constantly flooding your brain with a reward from alcohol, it gets used to that and it starts to crave it and want it all the time. And so when we take breaks from drinking and we're in that place of dependency, it can send us into what's known as the alcohol deprivation effect, where we're dependent on something and we become deprived of it. And so what it does is it actually increases our craving for it. It increases our motivation for it. And oftentimes it leads people to relapse and to binge drink. And an example I like to use, and it's not a perfect example, but it's impacting the similar part of the brain. Let's say today you were to say, I'm never going to drink water again. Like, I'm just done with drinking water. Logically, you might say, okay, sure, I'll do that. But by tomorrow or the next day, you're going to be really obsessing on getting your hands on some water because you need it to survive. And so when you finally do get your hands on a glass of cold water, you're probably going to chug it because you've been deprived of something you need to survive. And again, not a perfect example because we don't really need alcohol to survive per se, but it's impacting that similar part of the brain that's responsible for our survival needs. And we have addiction, that's where it lives. And so when we're deprived of alcohol, we're thinking about it all the time because the deprivation gets stronger and stronger. And when we finally do drink, we end up binge drinking because we have essentially been depriving ourselves of something we're dependent upon. So these challenges, in my experience and what I've heard from others, they oftentimes can make the drinking problem worse for people. I'm curious what you have to say about that too, Bruce.
Exactly the same. So I just say hi, Ian. Hi, Steve. Ian, hope your COVID's better. I know you've got COVID at the moment, and your good lady's got it as well. So I hope you're both better. And hi, Steve, and good to see you again. I always advise. I've got a client. I better not say too much, just in case they watch us. But yeah, if I get a client who's into or has come on and said to me, listen, I'm going to try sober October or dry January or whatever it is, my advice to them always is don't. Yeah. Because it's just not a good concept. I was speaking to a new client the other day who is a binge drinker, and I was explaining to them that when someone comes on the program, the basics of the Sinclair Method is the same, but the way that each person walks through their own journey is completely different. Mm-hmm. So with this guy, he was a binge drinker, and I said, what I need to do with you is I need to get you onto the medication. Now he was having about a 4-week gap in between a week binge. So he was having that 4 weeks where he wasn't drinking, and then he was having a binge for a week. And he couldn't understand why he couldn't go any longer than 4 weeks. And when I went in and explained just what you were saying, Katie, about the deprivation effect and the fact that the craving was building, and it's just a routine that the brain is getting into, it made a lot of sense to him. So again, he said to me, for the first time, that's the first time someone has explained to me why I'm going through the process or the binging that I'm going through. And he said, it makes so much sense. Now that you say it. And I said, now what I want to do is I want to get you onto naltrexone. I want you on naltrexone for about a month to see how you're responding and see how much of a reduction we get from that first month on the thing. Yeah. Once we get an element of control onto the binge that week when you're drinking, once we've got that down and under an element of control, and I said, what we will then do, and I said, this is just bear with me on this one, I said to him, and I said, we're going to then introduce alcohol during the weeks that you're not drinking. And he just kind of went to me, he went, ooh, you can't do that. But when I explained to him the deprivation effect and the period of time when he's not drinking, and I said, we need to get rid of that deprivation effect. So what we need to do is introduce, and this is just this guy's example, it's not right across the board, but this guy's example, I said, we will introduce some alcohol during the week. Once you've had a good time on the medication and got everything else settled, then we'll introduce some other alcohol during the week, and then we'll bring the whole lot down. Yeah. And then do it that way so that you're not going through that period of deprivation, which is what's creating the binge. Exactly. And then you know yourself, just like you were saying, that when people do binge, they go back to drinking. Each time they binge, they go back to drinking the same, if not slightly more. And over a long period of time, nobody goes from drinking one beer on a Friday night when they're a teenager to drinking a bottle of vodka overnight. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, from my experience, the reason people get to that stage is because of periods of abstinence.
Yeah. And it goes against
that's
logical thinking, right? But
Mm.
yeah.
And it's the number of times that I've seen people, they try stop drinking and then they start again, try stop, and each time it goes up a little bit, and the binge period gets a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and eventually it gets to the stage where people are drinking all day, every day. But if you look back, and it's something we never did in the abstinent world, we never went back and looked at that history of how people got to that stage. But from people I've spoken to in the Sinclair Method, when you look back through the history, it was a gradual build-up, but interspersed with periods of abstinence where the drinking suddenly went up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a defeating cycle that people can get stuck in, because for a lot of us, we get to a place where we're completely fed up. We want to fix this problem, so we do what we think we're supposed to do. And if you go to, your GP or ask, most people, they'll say, "Oh yeah, just quit drinking." And so we do what we think is right, but then we are having this insane battle, and it's way more difficult than just don't drink. If it were that simple, we wouldn't have as many people as we do with alcohol problems. And so, I know for me, it's like, I'm like, okay, this is it. This is the time I'm going to quit. Like, I've tried so many times before, but I know this is the time that's different. And you feel so motivated and excited. And then the deprivation effect kicks in. And for me, it was like, it won every time. I had to relapse every time. And like I said, right before TSM, I was just like, okay, I guess I'm going to be an alcoholic. Like, that's the lot in life I've been given, kind of thing. And I know a lot of people are at that place, and a lot of people are suffering today that would benefit greatly from TSM, and they have no idea it exists. And I know that's why you and I are so on fire to put ourselves out there and raise awareness about this, because it needs to be the frontline treatment. It needs to be, one of the options that's offered to someone alongside AA or rehab or things like that. So yeah, still a long way to go, but we're getting there, I hope.
Yeah, we're pushing it forward slowly, and and I think as well, I mean, with all the work that Claudia Christian's done in the States and across there, and all the work that you and Katie do with Thrive, and it's slowly but surely, like we were just saying before, I've got some TV coming to interview me next week for the process. So again, it's not going to change everything overnight, but it's another cog in the wheel, and it's going to slowly but surely it will start to build and start to. I think in about 5 to 10 years time, it will start to have an impact. And I've had this might be a little bit off topic, but I'll mention it really quickly. But I'm actually going to start approaching some of the drink companies. Because it suddenly dawned on me just recently that the challenge that the drink companies have, or the constant clash that goes on between drink companies and alcohol programs and issues, is that they become very opposites. They're always fighting each other. But what I'm starting to realize is, actually, do you know what? The Sinclair Method is not anti-alcohol. It's not. It's not anti the bar or the pub or any kind of advertising. It's what we need is education, and we need people to be educated. First and foremost, is on. We need to educate people on what is causing the addiction in the first place, and then once we know what is causing the addiction, we know what to look out for in the next generation. And if that next generation then start to realize, hang on, I'm getting into a bit of trouble with my drinking, and the Sinclair Method is a go-to process, they can quite easily get the medication from the doctor, and they can even use it as a preventative. And then, so I'm thinking, if I speak to some of the drinks companies, then that's what they're scared of, is the whole drink industry collapsing.
Yeah.
Because of all this anti-alcohol and yeah, it's we could work with them rather than against them, and they would be quite happy to promote that.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of money. and influence, shall we say.
Yeah, I think like you said too, for people to be aware of how it develops. For me, I'm fascinated by the brain and how alcohol addiction functions in the brain, and I'm constantly reading books and learning about this more and more. For me, when I first realized how I got alcohol use disorder, I think I was a ways into TSM. It was just such an empowering thing to understand, just the basics. Anyone can understand the basics of how it's working. It doesn't require like a scientific background or anything like that. People can understand, the fundamentals of how it develops. But for me, it was very empowering because I could see, oh, like, of course, like anybody's brain or almost anybody's brain can learn this because our brains love reward. And when you feed it that reward over and over again, even if you're meaning to or not, me, I was just in my 20s. I was like, oh, this is fun. I'll party for a while and then I won't anymore. But through that, I developed it. And just knowing that and knowing then how the Sinclair method undoes that, knowledge is power in that way. And for me, it was like I became less of a victim to my cravings. I could more understand, okay, this is just my brain looking for that reward. And maybe I would take naltrexone and drink, or I could find other ways to reward my brain. But I was no longer this victim to my brain and this alcohol addiction really running the show. The more I learned and the longer I was on TSM, it was an incredibly life-changing experience.
And the other thing I was going to ask you was that obviously our program is naltrexone plus alcohol plus support equals recovery. That will throw a lot of people upside down and inside out, especially when you say medication plus alcohol, because the whole idea of conventional recovery is no medication and no alcohol.
Yeah, that's true.
And so when we sort of say, well, we're going to use medication plus alcohol, plus support, all of a sudden that really kind of messes with people's heads.
Yeah.
Have you come across any objections to that, or
oh yeah.
How do you get around that sort of things?
So I started a TikTok, and Steve's here. He knows. He and I have chatted about this a bit because I've gotten a lot of pushback. I've gotten a lot of people really excited and starting the method and talking to their doctor about the method and seeing changes. So there's that side of it too, which is awesome. But of course, there's the diehards that just think I'm like insane for talking about this. But I think the way I see it is like, we're not out there saying, hey, if you're sober, come and start drinking and take this pill. Like, yes, we've worked with some people who are sober and they're really struggling in their recovery. So they go to the Sinclair method to, work toward pharmacological extinction of the addiction. But I think like my approach is really, if someone's still drinking today and they can't stop, or maybe they're not ready to stop and this is destroying their life, interrupting this with the medication, like they're doing what they're already going to be doing anyway, and starting this medication, starting this treatment to help them get to a better place. Because a lot of people who are struggling with alcohol, for me too, it's like, I can't imagine quitting drinking, or like maybe I feel compelled to quit, but then like we talked about, the alcohol deprivation effect kicks in. So for me, it's about meeting people where they're at. We're not, telling them to, if they're sober, to start drinking again. And I think we have, like, I've actually been diving into a lot of the research and statistics of traditional treatment. And I have that to stand on because research papers over and over again state that 80% or more of people will relapse from traditional treatment within 6 months. Like, it's a consensus amongst people who work in this field and the professionals in this field. So something isn't working there. And if we're adding in another option that has a success rate like the Sinclair method, like I feel really confident in talking about that because we have the data to back it up. And, I have my personal experience to back it up as well. I know the difference between white knuckled abstinence, going that route versus, gradually reducing over time. And then for me, going alcohol free through this treatment, it's, I feel really confident. Like, even I'm not a doctor, of course. And so sometimes people will feel intimidated talking to doctors, but I'm so grateful for my personal experience because I have that to ground into it. And there's science and research to back it up as well.
There's a gentleman, I won't mention his name live on here, but I think you'll know who I mean. There's a gentleman on the documentary program from England that I was speaking to a while ago. It was a few months ago. And we were talking about the success rate in abstinent-based programs. And he said, and he's quite a straight talker. He just says what he thinks.
Mhm.
And he said, why do we always talk about the success rate in abstinence-based programs? He said, why don't we ever talk about the failure rate?
Yeah.
And I went, wow. I thought I said, it's not to be negative or to be down on it or anything else, but what he said to me, which was quite interesting, and it really hit me, was that I always say to people, I've got epilepsy.
Mm.
Now, if I went to the doctor with issues with my epilepsy and he said, okay, we've got a solution to your epilepsy here that has a 5% success rate, or we have a solution that has a 78% success rate, and which one would you try? And it sounds really basic and simple and obvious, but that's the battle that we have trying to speak to people, is we're sort of saying, well, listen, we're not knocking the one that's got the 5% success rate, but we've got an option here that has a 78% success rate. It's got a clinically trialed 30 years of research, funded and paid for by the Finnish government, not by just some Joe blogs.
Yeah.
And Katie's been working with it for years. I've been working with it for years. We've seen it happen through client after client after client. And then I'm starting to get to the point now where I start to realize, well, actually, I need to shout more about what the program does in compared to what's happening in the other one, the other side of things. This is what I'm saying, not to knock it, because it will work for some people, but to say, if it doesn't work for you, if you've been to rehab, if you've been to AA, CA, SMART meetings, any of those recovery models, and for some reason it hasn't worked for you, it is not a moral failing. It's not you that's failed. It's just that there is another option out there, and we have to get, well, we're trying as hard as we can, but we need to get the word out there to say, listen, why is this not being used? Why is it not the front line, like you said? Why is this not the frontline option right across the world?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've asked doctors that, and the response I get is because they believe abstinence is better. And I have absolute respect for these people and their careers and what they do to help people with addiction treatment. But if they haven't personally experienced it, again, going back to like logically, abstinence does sound like a better, safer idea. Like that's what I always hear. Abstinence is better and safer. It's like, well, yeah, but eating no sugar is probably better and safer too. But is that realistic for people? So I think, it's going to take, I love thinking about what the future could look like if the Sinclair method and, medication treatment are the front line. And we know they're underutilized and they're super effective, but it's like turning around the Titanic. It's like, how do we, change the whole treatment system and how things are done? So yeah, it's exciting, but it's also frustrating, to be honest, sometimes. Like, and I just want to say, for people watching, don't discount your individual ability to raise awareness, because I talked with someone recently who runs a Sinclair Method practice here in the US, and they see tons of people. And the way that physician learned about it was by one patient who came to him and told him about the Sinclair method. And from that, he's treated thousands of people with this treatment. So to not underestimate the impact you as one person can have by telling your doctor about it, or telling your neighbor or friend or whoever, it can have a huge ripple effect. So we're all kind of moving this forward, I think.
And when I look back on how I heard about it, I went on, and again, it was one person, Claudia, who had done a TED talk, and that gave me one thing. And then there was one other lady from America. She was from California area, I think, who did a whole bunch of videos on YouTube, and she was running free of charge TSM meetings for people all over the world. And I thankfully, Katie, that was Katie. That was my source of getting information in the early days, because Katie stood up and she put on free TSM meetings in her own time, getting meetings together for people who were on the Sinclair Method, because hardly anyone knew about it. Yeah. And here was some guy in Scotland who found them. I can't remember how I found them. I think it was on YouTube. It was all your YouTube stuff. And then I picked up most of my knowledge and information from those meetings. So thank you. I mean, and I always say and Katie won't mind me saying, you won't mind me saying it, but she's a very humble lady. Katie is the YouTube pioneer for the Sinclair Method. I mean, Katie she's got hundreds. What is it, hundreds?
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of YouTube videos on the Sinclair Method and the stages. I think you actually videoed you video diaried most of your journey, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much like all 12 months. I think maybe I did, I don't know, like every month about I would do a video. And then as I got through it myself, I started making videos to kind of answer people's questions and give tips. And it just honestly naturally evolved into what I do now, just through, you know, having a passion for it, I guess, and wanting to raise awareness about it.
Yeah.
I think
And
I was
I always,
inspired I was doing
okay.
YouTube because I think that's where I was looking for answers. And that's how I found the Sinclair Method through Claudia's TED Talk as well. So I think a lot of people turn to YouTube to hear from people like, how did they overcome alcohol addiction? Like, no, and so.
Yeah. And like Steve, I mean, Steve runs a Facebook page, and I was saying to someone the other day, Steve, they were asking me about Facebook pages and everything, and they were in the UK, and I said the one that I would promote is your one, because I know the knowledge that is on that, and I know that you look at it and check it regularly. The knowledge that is on, I am more than comfortable sending a client to your Facebook page.
Yeah.
Most of the other ones are pretty good, but you've got to be a bit careful of some of the advice that's given on some of them.
Yeah.
But Steve's one, I really respect the stuff that you're doing, Steve.
Yeah.
So keep going. So, any other TSM wisdom? That's a big
Oh,
open question.
I could be here for hours and hours talking about this, Bruce. I
We'll go
mean,
back to
yeah, it's just like we talk about a lot, the medication, someone was recently asking me like, how does the medication play into like the emotional, mental, spiritual side of recovery? And like you and I talk about a lot, the medication is a crucial tool. Like I know I wouldn't be where I am today without naltrexone and the Sinclair Method, but we have to be aware there's more to the treatment than just popping a pill and letting it do all the work. We've got to change our habits and create new coping tools and change our beliefs and how we see alcohol and its role in our life. And what's great about TSM is this can be done gradually, day by day, little by little. So it's not an overwhelming thing. It's really seeing yourself transform with the tool of the medication, as you modify habits and things. But I think that's one thing that disappoints people is if they start on the medication, they expect it to be, curing them in a month, and they're like really disappointed. I get those emails every day like, oh, I started this last week and I'm still drinking. What's going on? And so that's one thing, having those realistic expectations, but then also realizing that oftentimes our drinking is a habitual thing. It's a coping tool. And all the time, I'm sure you hear it from your clients as well. They'll say, oh, I didn't realize how much I was drinking out of habit, or I don't really want to drink, but I see that I'm pouring the wine every night out of habit. Like, how do I overcome that? So again, the pill is incredible at what it does to heal the brain. But we have to kind of meet it halfway and, change our lifestyle around it as well.
And I just whilst you mentioned that, I've got a client that I'm working with at the moment who's drinking a bottle of whiskey a day. He's down to, he'll have 2 cans of beer on a Friday night and 2 cans of beer on a Saturday night. Done that for a while, coping absolutely no problem, no white knuckling it, no obsessive thinking, no craving. He went away for a week and forgot to take his medication with him. And because he didn't have his medication, he said psychologically he started getting really on edge and didn't have a drink Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday he had a sip of whiskey for some reason, and he ended up drinking a bottle of whiskey that night. And he came back and then the next week he came back to me and he was so panicky and so scared and everything else. He said, I've relapsed. And I said, no, you haven't. And I said, did you take your medication? And he went, no. And I said, right. So that's what's happened. It's directly related to your medication. And I said, what I want you to do this weekend is I want you to take your pill and I want you to have 2 cans of beer. And I want you to do that as soon as you possibly can. And he just looked at me as if I was crazy. And I said, you've lost all confidence in the process and in everything that you know about the Sinclair Method. And you need to know that with yourself that this is just something that's happened as a direct result of not taking your medication. So again, I spoke to him a few days later, and he went, Bruce, he said, I had 2 cans the other night, and he said, I took my pill, and I said, how were you? And he said, absolutely fine, no craving, no desire for more, nothing. And to take someone who is classified as a chronic drinker, drinking a bottle of whiskey a day, first and foremost, take them down to two cans of beer twice a week alongside the medication. And then if he misses the medication, you can relapse just as quickly without taking the medication on the Sinclair Method. So you have to be 100% compliant. He went straight back up again, but then the minute he went back on the medication, after that, he was straight back to where he was before. Yeah. And all of a sudden, and I said, you won't do that again in a hurry, will you? And he went, never again in my life. And that just shows you the effectiveness. I've got other stories as well, but I'm sure you've got them as well, but it shows you the effectiveness. But like you say, it's also very, very important. Katie and Karen run Thrive in America. They run a program with videos and live group meetings and Zoom meetings. You can get one-to-one coaching if you want it. All of that side of it is, I personally believe, is absolutely vital. Some people do fight their own way through it by taking the medication, but you can speed up the can you speed it up? Yeah, you'll speed it up, but you can make it a lot easier with someone there, either with Thrive or through what we do. There's Karen. She is here. Hi, Karen. You can make it a lot easier and comfier, smoother, by putting yourself into a support program, whether it's with Thrive or through ourselves in Scotland and the UK. And it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're doing too, Bruce, like working one-on-one with people, that's awesome as well. And of course, not everyone needs to plug into a program. I was just talking to a gal recently. She was seeing a therapist who was working with her on some trauma issues, and that's what she needed. But I think the crucial thing is to really ask for help. I know for me, when I started TSM, I was like, I can do this all on my own. I'm going to figure it out all on my own. And a few months in, I was really humbled because it was just all overwhelming, all the emotions coming up, things from the past that I was using alcohol to kind of mask. I had to start seeing a therapist, and it was honestly really hard for me to seek that help, to ask for that help. And so I think a lot of us are in that place where we've kind of gotten ourselves into this issue with alcohol use disorder. There might be shame around, or just requires humility around asking for help or admitting I need help. So I think that's so important. Whatever the help is someone needs, it's different person to person, but we have created that program to really, support people who are looking for that, accountability and personal guidance and support in the day-to-day of TSM. And I know you've done the same with your program as well. And it's pretty awesome, the people you've been able to reach in Scotland and the things that are coming to fruition from the unicycle. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's we just have to get the message out there. And I was saying to someone today, when I was working in the rehab centers, every single day was a battle. It was a constant battle. In a rehab center, people weren't allowed to go out. Well, they did. They eventually went out on their own when they were so far down the track in the program. But we were drink testing them or breath testing them. We were drug testing them. We were searching bags. They had to have breakfast at a certain time, lunch at a certain time. They had to go to work in the afternoon. I love the guys I worked with. I've got so much respect for them, but we need to move on. We need to move on. It works for 5% of the population. Now, if that process works, absolutely, we support it 100%. But I had a businessman on the phone today. He said, I can't afford to go to rehab. He said, not that he can't afford it financially. He said, I've got a business to run.
Right.
The point I'm trying to get at is alcohol dependency, AUD, today is completely and utterly treatable. And in a much simpler, kinder, gentler, gracious way.
Yeah.
Not that the people are bad. I've worked with some amazing people, absolutely amazing people. Whose whole heart and everything is to help people and get them back to where they were. But we need to move forward with science and medicine advancements.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's challenging, I think, for people who don't know what to expect in traditional treatments. And again, the gal I was talking to this week, she went to those traditional rehabs twice, not really knowing what to expect, but kind of anticipating, oh, like this treatment is going to help me get sober. But as soon as she left, she relapsed. So I think a lot of people go into these treatments thinking this is the answer, but then they leave and they realize it's not the answer. And that's a really terrifying place to be, where the thing that you spent time and money on thinking this is the answer for me, it's not working. And that's a scary place to be.
And I always say to people, I've got epilepsy, and if I went to my doctor, and I always use this example, but if I went to the doctor and said, doctor, I'm having lots of seizures, can you give me some help? And if he said, well, Bruce, you're trying to draw too much attention to yourself, just have less seizures and go to your local epilepsy support group and everything will be all right. That doctor would be struck off.
Yeah.
Now, once we get, going back to what I said at the very start, if our starting point of treatment for alcohol dependency, alcohol use disorder, if we start at the point that alcohol dependency is a neurological condition and not a moral failing or a character shortfall, then the whole treatment goes off on a different angle. And that's why the success rate goes up.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So.
Yeah. And like Karen said, treating them like criminals, like in the treatment system, it does feel like that, I think for people, if they're having to do drug tests and pee in a cup, and people really want to, if they still really want to drink, which, we talked about the alcohol deprivation effect earlier, it's like they're going to find ways around it or ways to treat the system, or as soon as it's over, they're going to drink afterwards. So that kind of punitive actions toward people, it might help in the short term, but I don't think it promote sustainable recovery, in my opinion. Just what I've learned from clients over the years who've been in and out of that system over and over again, and then found success through the Sinclair method.
But what I find interesting is the success rates in the industry I used to work at was about the same as the Sinclair method when people were in the rehab under lock and key. So the difference with if you can keep people under a very controlled environment where they can't go out, they get tested, blah, 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 and they will not drink, versus that's a 70 to 80% success rate. We had most of our guys, I prided myself in getting the guys through the program, but then 2 weeks later, bang, they would relapse. But I prided myself in getting everyone through that. But you had to be quite brutal with them. It's like the golden rule in rehab was stay on top of these guys because they will run rings around you if you give them a chance. And that's not right. It's just not. And when you start to realize what we know through the Sinclair method, that's horrible. It's just, come on, guys. It's a neurological condition. It's not a criminal offense.
Yeah. And I know we were talking about Claudia's TEDx talk, which has made, the Sinclair method famous. But she talks about her experience in a detox and how dehumanizing it was. And we're not saying that's what every detox is like. I think it just probably depends on which one you go to. But to go to a place where they just like shame you for being in that state of alcohol use disorder, a lot of people who I talk to who are considering that, they dread it. They do not want to go. And I've never experienced that, obviously. But it's not helping people. It sounds like a pretty uncomfortable environment.
So unfortunately, I think Katie needs to be away for a meeting and I need to be away to bang some drums and do some
Bruce
stuff
has got a band to get to, a performance.
I've got what they call an open mic night, and the band that I play with are running it, and they've asked me to go along and do some sort of drumming for some people. So I need to get away to that, unfortunately, in a pub, quite happily in a pub. I'll take my cards with me and see if I can get
alcohol counselor by day, band member by night.
In the bars and the clubs around Scotland.
Yeah. Alternate life you live.
So I need to have a word with you before the next one. Just as Karen's been on here, does StreamYard do 3 people?
Yeah.
On a discussion.
Yep.
We'll have a chat with Karen before next month and see if Karen will come
Karen.
on.
Sounds good.
Well, she's here. Have 3 people and see if we can get some I don't know. See if we can do more than just my dulcet tone. Your wisdom's very good. So anyway, thanks for the plug. I haven't got my glasses on. About the Facebook page. You said earlier on, Steve. What did you say? Thanks, Bruce. The check is in the post. Steve, I need to say this one publicly. Steve doesn't charge a penny for what he does, like so many people in the TSM world. So I don't want a check from you, Steve. I just want you to keep doing what you're doing.
You can send me the check, Steve.
So Karen said she will come on. Right. So we now have an announcement to say that this time next month, the first Wednesday of next month, we will have Katie Lain and Karen Dion from Thrive Recovery, thriverecovery.com.
Yeah.
And myself. Great. And yeah, it'll be good just to have three of us. And Karen is incredible. Karen's got a lot of wisdom. And again, she's been through the program, so it's somebody who knows what they're doing.
And she too is the traditional kind of treatment background or counselor background in the traditional alcohol and recovery treatment. So she has an interesting perspective. So look forward to that.
And then one week we need to see if Dr. Roy Scarpo can come on sometime.
That would be cool.
I know he wasn't well last time I emailed him, so I hope he's okay.
Okay.
So yeah, just do some different stuff, I think, and get some.
Yeah.
We'll ponder some stuff. So
anyway,
thank you very much, Katie. Hope your next
Bruce.
meeting goes well.
Great to see you.
I'm off to try and count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, and we'll speak to everyone soon.
Bye.
Thank you.